Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I'm the actor.
My name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
All right, here we go, Josh.
All right. We're talking about Captain Marvel. I mean, it's like the biggest movie to come out this year so far, I think. It's been very successful in the box office, and it's the first Marvel movie to be starring or led by a female character. And it's obviously not a unprecedented thing because Wonder Woman came out a couple years ago and did really well, and it seems like a lot of people are talking about her being the star of this movie, and that's like where everybody starts. But I kind of wanted to talk about the movie itself a little bit and try to figure out. I feel like Marvel had a tough time trying to put something like this together as quickly as they did, even though this movie was announced like in 2014. I was doing a little bit of research, and the movie was announced in like October of 2014. So it was like 5 years ago. But it does seem to me like it kind of got greenlit and put into motion fairly quickly. How'd you like it? Did you enjoy it, or what'd you think?
Well, we kind of took an unwritten vow to start with the positive, and whenever we start with that statement, it means that there's a lot of negative coming, and I can't hide that. So starting with the positive, I wanted to enjoy it more than I did. So we'll start with that. But the positives are, I found it interesting that it was as much of a Nick Fury origin story, or at least mid-origin story. It's good to always go back and look at a decade that I loved. I loved the 90s. I loved everything about Blockbuster. I loved, well, except for their return policies. I love everything about looking back. I love the fact that things really aren't that different nowadays. It's interesting to see LA and a subway and a train that just got built like 3 years before this movie takes place in 1990. So all that stuff is fun. But honestly, that's about it for me. I don't want to bag on this film because I know a lot of people worked hard on it, but there's something missing for me in this movie. I don't know what it is. I kept thinking to myself as I was driving home, I was forcing myself to remember it. And then I thought, well, is this what it's like for people who have no vested interest in comic book movies at all? Is this what it's like for them to go and see a movie like this? But I can't say that objectively because I am a comic book person and I do love these movies. So I wonder, if you have never seen a comic book movie and you watch Black Panther, is it going to be as thrilling? I would venture to say yes, because it's a well-structured movie and it's a well-told movie, irregardless of the fact that it's a superhero movie. And actually, Black Panther is really kind of done a disservice because now that's the evaluation level.
You can't go directly to Black Panther. I would say let's start with Guardians of the Galaxy. Let's start comparing it in that realm. You can't just go directly to a movie like Black Panther, which works on multiple levels.
But in my discussion, though, the point is that is Black Panther as interesting as just a movie to people who have no interest in superhero movies? And the answer, I would venture to say, is yes, because it's well structured. It almost feels like it's not a superhero movie, Black Panther. This one, it falls flat for me. And I've been trying to put my finger on it, and I can't quite seem to put my finger on anything other than, and I hate it.
You hate it? Is that what you said?
No. I was saying that what I was getting ready to say, I hate that I feel this way. I wasn't saying that I hated this movie. This is not a movie you just hate. You know what I mean? It's not that bad.
Yeah.
It's well done for what they did. I just hate, I'm glad you kind of stopped me because my statement is pretty severe. And I hate feeling this way, but I think I know why.
I think we should start unpacking this because I've thought a lot about the thing that interests me about this movie is not necessarily the plot or the character or any of those things. It is the position that I feel Marvel thought that they were in and how they got themselves out of it. And maybe it's probably a cynical way to think about it, I guess, but follow me on this. So they were taking a little bit of heat for not having, as many strong female characters, multiple years into this Marvel Cinematic Universe, and not doing Black Widow movie, anything like that, not taking set and solidified characters and then giving them starring roles or giving them their big backstory movies in this. And so when they announced the Captain Marvel movie back in whatever it was, 2014, 2015, they kind of said like, here's our goalpost. We will have this character starring in this movie. And they not only had to make the character relevant to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they had to make the character almost the most relevant to the Marvel Cinematic Universe to conclude these 3 phases of the MCU. And it's really difficult to do that when you haven't even been introduced to the character months before the final film of these 3 phases of the MCU. So right there, they're kind of like putting themselves in a corner and having to try to figure out a way to get out of that corner. So I think that when you look at it, when you start from that point of view, it's got to be really difficult to do that. You have to have a character who will make such an impact between Infinity War and Endgame that you would believe them coming in, at the beginning of Endgame and being able to go up against Thanos and all the forces that having to deal with all of that. You would have to believe that she has the capabilities of doing that. So that right there is going to be really difficult, especially to have to lay out the capabilities of her powers, or at least to glimpse her powers in one movie, because this movie is multiple movies. It's an origin story. It's a period piece. It is display of her capabilities as a superhero, quote unquote superhero. She's the most superhero-y of all the superheroes in this universe. I mean, in the DC universe, you've got Superman, which is like Superman. I mean, it is like he's got kryptonite, but we don't know what her kryptonite is yet, I guess. But I'm sure she's going to have some sort of thing to fight against. But spoiler alert, at the end of this movie, she wins, and big. So it's gotta be, there's gotta be some stakes for her, because at the end of this movie, there really are no stakes for her that we can see. We don't see any way for her to be contained. So that's going to be interesting to see how they do that in Endgame. But they had to fit in a lot of this stuff. And the reason why it's a period piece, I think, is not because Marvel wants to make a period piece. It's because they had to give her the backstory and give the timeline of all the events in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the space of her not being there, and then her kind of jumping back in when she needs to at the beginning of Endgame, this next movie. So you put all that into a blender, and I think that what came out as Captain Marvel is maybe as good as they could do with the cards that they were dealt. But I don't know. I mean, it's got to be difficult to try to form something like that together and make something that's cohesive and believable and fits within those things and is not going to be directly. I mean, because the movies that you could directly compare this to do would be the Thor: Dark World, I guess ish. Especially like Thor Ragnarok and the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, because they're primarily in space, set in space, and not on Earth. So that's kind of where we're dealing with in this. We've got to be the Kree world of the Kree planet of Hala needs to be believable. We have to be kind of all in there. We don't have the grounding of cultural differences of Black Panther or the espionage of Captain America 2, whatever that was called, Winter Soldier. So we don't have all those things to play on. We don't have the grounding of Earth to play with her backstory. So she's a fish out of water too. So you have to deal with all that. So it's a lot of stuff crammed into one movie, and I don't know. I was giving them a lot of slack, I think. So I've definitely heard what you've said from other people, and I totally get it. But I don't know how they could have done any better. I really don't. It's hard for me to say. So we can talk about some other things I have some issues with afterwards, song choices, things like that. But I don't want to get into that just yet. So how does that hit you? Could you envision a movie that would be shaped in a different way that would still get us to where we need to be at the beginning of Avengers Endgame?
That's a good question, and I don't think I'm qualified to answer that question because I don't write movies, and I know that sounds like a cop-out, and it sounds like a justification for starting off with the negative, and you went a really long way around rationalizing how you felt about the film, which I found interesting. But I understand exactly what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying because what you're saying is fair. Put in that context, it is fair to evaluate this film on a different level other than Black Panther. Now I understand why you made that statement in the beginning. But the other side to that is, and we can get into this at some point, is that a story is a story is a story. It doesn't matter if the pinnacle is Black Panther. They still told an incredible story. So what is it lacking in Captain Marvel that, for me, let it lay flat? But your question was, could I envision how they could incorporate all of these things and then still connect it to Endgame? Well, actually, in the long run, it's the beeper and her showing up at the spoiler. Kind of know it's got to happen, but there's an end credit scene, and my father was like, "Ooh, she's with the Avengers," and I was like, "She's in the Avenger, Dad," which he actually said, "Well, I thought Captain America was the first Avenger."
Wow.
Like, well, he is. Well, then why is her middle name? Yeah, why is her middle name Avenger? I said, well, that's her like flight name. That's like her call sign. Yeah, and he goes, okay, that's a little bit confusing. And I was like, yeah, it's a little bit confusing. I'll give you that point, especially to somebody who is just watching them on the sideline as just a normal audience member, if you want to say normal, meaning no film interest, no film passion, just loves movies. It doesn't want to analyze movies, doesn't want to talk about it really afterwards unless it sparks some kind of conversation. So the answer to your question is, I have no idea how you do that. I have no idea how you do that. I think that if they had planned this movie when they did, they had time to figure that out. And maybe it's an impossible task. And on that level, yeah, they did a good job connecting all the dots. Really, I think the whole connecting it to Endgame is it's a non-discussion because all you had to do was show the beeper, which they did, explain the beeper, which they did, and show up at the end of the credits, which they did, which is fine. That's all you need to know. So really, this is an origin story. This is not an origin story that does anything but connect the dots with these characters. And so it's insignificant what has happened 25 years in the future to these characters, Nick Fury and Agent Coulson and all of them. It's insignificant at this point because actually the things that I thought were the trappings, and this is all spoilers, so people, if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's made $600 million. Where have you been?
Yeah, a lot of people have seen it.
Yeah. So I think they're okay.
Pretty good chance you've seen it. Yeah.
And a lot of people have been talking about it online. It's caught a lot of slack about people reviewing it and giving it a hard time. And I hate all that stuff. I hate it. I hate that it's a discussion that it's a female lead and we got to bag on her before the movie even comes out. It's like, if you don't like the movie, bag on it after you've seen the movie. Just stop, people. It's a waste of time.
Or don't go see the movie.
Or don't go see the movie. Or don't put your opinion out. You know, it's like your opinions are showing through your flaws as a human being. So just, but that said, they had the impossible task of making the good guys bad and the bad guys good, and then the good guys bad again, and then the bad guys good again. And because we already know who the Kree are. We already know who they are. We already know the blue guy, which I don't understand why he didn't have the black stuff. Ronan, why he didn't have the black stuff on his face. I guess that's when he's really evil. He drips black goo from his face. I don't know. He looked not as menacing like that. And he scared me when I saw Guardians of the Galaxy. I was like, that guy's good. Mm-hmm. And we know Yaman Hansu, who I love. We know they're not good people. So they did the impossible task of twisting everything around and keeping the audience on its toes of who's bad, who's good. You cast Ben Mendelsohn, who's great.
Exactly.
He's great. And actually, it's ironic because we were just talking about how much of a bad guy he always plays. And then boom.
Exactly. And we talked about Mississippi Grind. Which was directed by Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden.
And then they kind of twist that, and that's fine too. So they did all that really good. I honestly and truthfully do not have answers to my own questions. My question is, why did it fall flat for me? I don't know. Why did she fall flat for me? I said it. I love her. God, let me say this as strongly as I possibly can. I love Brie Larson.
Tell me what she did wrong. What did she do wrong?
I, you know what? I can't. I wouldn't presume to say I think she did this wrong. I don't know.
Okay.
There's you're always talking about tonal stuff, and when I saw Aquaman the second time, I was trying to figure out. I don't really understand tonal shifts in film, so I was trying to see through that movie because you had said you had some issues with the tones of the tonal changes in Aquaman. So I was like, okay, I guess that's the one, and I'd like to take a class where somebody defines here's a tonal change that works and here's a tonal change that doesn't work. But the humor in this movie, it's like she has that little joking relationship with her Kree buddies, and then it seems like Miss 1990, Southern California girl on the back of the truck hanging out in the woods, and she's making jokes with her buddies, and then all of a sudden she's like this serious person when she's fighting on the subway, and it's just there's just so many things that I don't know. I don't know how to define it. I really don't.
Could you compare her interactions with other people to Black Widow's interactions with other people? If we're doing like a 1-for-1, because Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson does have jokey type relationships with people, or jabs and japes at people, but then also has really serious. I mean, I'm thinking of what was it, Avengers 2, where she's like strapped to the chair and she's like talking on the phone, and then
I love that.
She's kind of like going back and forth, and then just like kicks butt and gets out of there and walks away. And that the tone for that is like in the pocket for me, and I think that the tone of Brie Larson like shifting back and forth is in the pocket for me in this movie too. So I didn't get that. You're not the first person to tell me that. So it's definitely a thing. The tonal shifts that people see are not the same as what I was seeing, I guess.
I want to make this very clear. I am not criticizing anything that she did. I am not understanding what I'm supposed to take from the character based on what they gave us. What she did, she's great. She's believable. She's charming. She's sophisticated. She's strong. Everything that makes a superhero, but I want to wear the costume. I want to have a blonde wig. I want to fly around and shoot beams out of my hands just like she does after the movie's over with. And that didn't happen for me with this. The very first time I saw Batman Begins, I actually felt like there was a cape attached to my back when the wind would blow and I could feel it. And, the first time that Captain America throws his shield, it's like, I believe I could throw it like that. So I don't know what the difference is. There's something not working correctly for me in this film where I didn't feel that way. And the difference between what we've come to know as Black Widow and what we saw in Carol Danvers is the fact that from the moment you meet Scarlett Johansson in Iron Man 2, something's up and there's a backstory. The backstory is severe. You know it. And just the way she fights and the way that she struts and the way that her just bravado, for lack of a better term, is just, there's something in there. And then when you see that sequence in the Avengers film where she, is talking to Mark Ruffalo or Bruce Banner about what they had to do to her to make her a successful killer, you knew that was there the whole entire time. And so maybe if this whole kind of like questioning who she was biting at her, that her humanity, meaning Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, maybe if that was biting at the very beginning of the film, like it showed up somewhere in her, she was asleep and she's had a dream, or they were, I don't know, something where it was just, there's a lot of angst behind these characters. And I think that's why people are attracted to them, because not only are they superhuman, finger quotes, but they have human frailties and these conflicts and these things that keep them grounded as human beings. And I think that's what we're going to learn about Bruce Banner and all that other stuff about how he couldn't become the Incredible Hulk because of his human trappings and he was afraid and blah, 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 blah. But there's a fallibility to these characters that it just didn't seem deep enough in this film. It didn't seem like a burden. So she didn't know where she was from. Okay. She can shoot beams out of her hands, and she's really, really cool looking in that green costume. Who cares? Okay. The most troublesome thing was that she couldn't remember why she knew Annette Bening's character, why she was the supreme
intelligence.
Yes, I was going to say justice. Why she was her supreme.
She was the avatar for the supreme intelligence. Yes.
Correct. Because when the supreme intelligence appears in front of you, they appear to you through somebody who was in your subconscious or your memory and that kind of stuff. So that right there was the deepest wound that she had that had to be fixed by the end of the movie. So she could, take that ride at the end of it and show us all that she is stronger than her frailties. And that was good. That subplot or that main plot was good, but did she miss the 90s? Did she miss blockbusters? Was when she was looking at blockbusters, was she seeing things that she recognized and couldn't figure out why she didn't recognize it?
She was gone for 6 years. So, I mean, Blockbuster probably hadn't even gotten to the prominence that it was in 1995 until I mean, there were probably some blockbusters or things like that. It was, but the fact of the matter is that she had amnesia, so she doesn't have any recollection of any of the things. She wasn't pining for Blockbuster or for these things that she knew on Earth, because she didn't even know she was from Earth. She just assumed she was Kree. I don't even think she knew she was. I don't even think that
human?
Yon-Rogg told her that she was half human, that she was just like somebody who had these powers, who had to control them, and she was on a training course to try to figure out how to control herself while she was fighting. That's what I got from the beginning, which, by the way, the beginning was slow. Like, it was difficult to get your footing at the beginning of the movie.
Hey, how you doing, Kree person? You green, you bleed green, I bleed green. Hey, how come you have a gun and I have fists?
She had a gun? What do you mean?
Yeah, but I'm saying that she could shoot beams out of her hands, and she was all powerful when it came to that. Yes, they were subduing some of her power, and they were manipulating her.
But she didn't know they were subduing some of her power.
Right, but she still knew she could shoot beams out of her arms.
Yeah.
So, hello, Kree person. Can you shoot beams out of your arms? Oh, no, you look different. You look different. How come everybody in Kree looks different? Okay, we're a universal culture. Okay, I get it. How come I can shoot beams out of my hands? Because you're half human, and we can't get to that part of the story just yet because, we got to keep that secret so you can have something to be. I mean, it doesn't make sense. The conflict of her as a character is not there for me. And so, regardless of what Brie Larson could bring to it, I think I think it's a disservice to say, how did she do? Well, she's not really given much to do, especially for the first 45 minutes.
So what you're saying is a flawed premise, which, I understand that argument. I do understand that argument, and I also agree with you that the first 30, 45 minutes is basically until you see Ben Mendelsohn, until you get some sort of like an idea of that character, the complexities of that character. It's really slow. It's rough. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm giving it a much bigger pass than I probably would, than I may normally do. I just love looking at the puzzle pieces that are the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
I'm more interested in why you feel like you're giving it more of a pass than I am about talking about the movie. That right there made it interesting to me. I'm like, okay, tell me why you're giving it, because you don't give anything a pass.
You're right. And it's because it has nothing to do with it being the first Marvel movie that's led by a woman, any of that. Like, I feel like I can, divorce myself from, trying to like be the person who says like, oh, it's amazing because there's a female lead of this movie. That's not, I'm not looking at it like that. I'm looking at it like, this is they've kind of like I said earlier, they've backed themselves into a corner. How are they going to get out of it? Or there's a piece, there's a hole in this Marvel Cinematic Universe puzzle that needs to be filled. How are they going to fill it? And I feel like they put together the sub pieces. They put together the structure that will fill that hole. Now, whether that is in and of itself a satisfying movie-going experience, I don't know. Maybe not. But when you look at it as, like, let's look at it as an episode of a TV show, an episode of a multi-episode miniseries, an epic, 10 episode, 13 episode, whatever. I guess technically it's how many movies have there been? 21 movies or something in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If we look at it like that, that is interesting to me to see. Does this put in the second to last puzzle piece to this huge puzzle? And is it a satisfying puzzle piece, or does it move the puzzle forward enough? And that's a pretty huge pass, because there are other puzzle pieces. I mean, Black Panther was a puzzle piece. You needed Wakanda for Infinity War. We needed a place to fight from in Infinity War. That was Wakanda. And we didn't have Wakanda until we had Black Panther. So there were definitely puzzle pieces in that movie, and it was a satisfying movie front to back in and of itself. So maybe it's one of these, it's not as satisfying of a TV episode, but the season or the series of this television show is still going to be a satisfying series, I guess. I don't know. I'm a lot more savage on a movie like Thor: Dark World than I would be for this movie, because this movie is so much more intertwined with what's happening with all the other characters who I've spent 10 hours with now on screen. The Iron Man, Captain America, all those guys. I've spent all this time with them on screen, and I know this is going to get them that much closer, because Captain Marvel will now be able to help them defeat Thanos, and then that will be a satisfying conclusion to these three phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So,
because you've referenced it twice now, I'm going to delve into Thor: Dark World, which I did not hate as much as everybody else did. I didn't even know I wasn't supposed to like it until everybody told me it was a bad movie. I actually enjoyed it. I don't have a problem with it, but I have sketchy taste and stuff, so I can see how I like certain things, and people are like, dude, do you look at that picture? You had a mullet. I just thought I had hair that feathered back into long hair in the back. I didn't know it was a mullet. Now it's a mullet. I still like that haircut, though. I'll tell you the truth. I still like that picture. And too, when the proms, I took my sister to her prom. Her boyfriend got sick at the last minute. Anyway, the point is that I liked my mullet, so I don't really know about my taste. So you keep referencing Dark World, okay? Dark World is as significant to the rest of the MCU as anything else, including Captain Marvel, regardless of whether or not she's going to help them defeat Thanos, okay? Because how are we... Well, we know that we didn't even know that she survived in Infinity War. She could have been snapped out of existence too, but obviously she wasn't. The only reference is that the beeper, and then we see her at the end of this movie. So without Dark World, you wouldn't know what the red stone was. You wouldn't know that the Infinity Stone was what they were talking about. So it's as significant as anything else in the MCU for that particular factor. Other than that, it's insignificant to me that she has anything to do with Endgame. And the only reason why we do know that is because of the way Infinity War ends. But other than that, it's not significant to this particular movie. So for me, the puzzle piece, okay, maybe it's like an ocean scene and all of the blue and all of the white of the ocean all starts to look the same. And until you get to the edge of the beach, you don't really notice the sand, and then you get the different colors of the sun and all that other stuff. So each piece is significant to the puzzle, but maybe if you just pulled out that white piece from the ocean, you wouldn't know it was anything other than just a white piece because you can't see it in context of the puzzle. That to me is not relevant to this particular story or any of the other ones. I think they've done a great job of connecting all of these movies. You could say that about Ant-Man and Wasp. It's insignificant to the rest of the Infinity War chapter, except for the ending.
But it's not, yeah, because the very end.
But it's just as minute of a piece of a puzzle as Captain Marvel is at the end of Infinity War. So my question goes back to this. The struggle and the angst and the conflict and the drama in somebody's existence is what powers a character. And I just realized I used the word powered. So I kept saying to myself as I was driving home, and since I've been thinking about this, and I actually asked you to do the podcast tonight instead of last night because we saw it yesterday, and I'm glad I did that because I wanted time to think about it. And I thought I was just going to love it so much I'd go see it a second time and have even more things to say about it tonight. But the bottom line comes down to I keep thinking of all those things that just when it breaks down, it one doesn't make any sense, and two, for this particular narrative, and two, it didn't, the things that they left unspoken could have been more interesting to me than what they put on the screen. Like that thing in her neck. How come she never once said, why do I have this thing in my neck? Nobody else has this thing in my neck. What is this thing in my neck? Her trying to pull it off and then something happening and then she loses her memory again and they're manipulating it. And then you see the Supreme Intelligence talking to Jude Law's character, but you'd have to bring up a whole nother character because you wouldn't know who she was or it was at that time. Them manipulating her to do what they need her to do. There's a subplot, and it could very easily be woven in there that there's these people that have been manipulating her the whole entire time. They boil it down to one line and they use it twice. You know, what can be given can be taken away. Wait, what? Did you give me these powers? She never says that. It's never answered. I mean, you eventually find out. And then that little dog tag thing she has in her neck or whatever, the electrical collar thing that she has, you know, we've seen that used in many, many movies. So we kind of know as an audience what that is, but it's never explained. It's never explained how she got it, why she needs it. Why was there not a subplot where they said, well, this was because, you know, whatever, something.
I got the feeling that it was the opposite. I got the feeling that instead of that plug, I mean, obviously the plug was a regulator for her powers or some sort of regulator of her powers, but she was under the impression that it was not, that it was something that was, it was the opposite. It was like a generator type situation that was not there, that was there to help her, I guess, assist in her creating or controlling those impulses.
And that's an explanation in the movie for the question that I just came up with, but it still leaves it open-ended because why do I need to be regulated? Why do I have this power? Where did it come from? Why am I the only one who has this? Are there other people who have this? Mm-hmm. Why not pretend to give it to other people so they can have it too, so it wouldn't stick out? You know, like, why am I so different than everybody else? It's never questioned. She's never like pondering why. She just takes it for granted that this is the way that it is. And you're right, she has amnesia and she doesn't remember, blah, 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 blah. But it's very quickly in the film that she realizes that the Supreme Intelligence is, she wants to know who that person is.
It's the person in her dreams. She feels like it's a bad guy. She feels like the Supreme Intelligence is a bad guy, that Annette Bening is the bad guy because she has no reference for the Annette Bening character in the movie. So she just assumes that Annette Bening is the bad guy because she sees her around the wreckage or whatever of some ship or something. You know, the initial scene we see at the beginning of the movie.
But that's it. That proves me a little bit more inquisitive than it proves me okay to be inquisitive about this because the film does start with a memory.
Yes.
So she does have memories. She does have some kind of something.
They're jumbled because she sees like Annette Bening as the bad guy, but spoilers, obviously, that Jude Law is the bad guy coming at her. So she's confused about what's happening in this environment, and she doesn't even know what that environment is. It's just some latent memory, some, you know, little piece of a memory that she's having to wrestle with.
I will say this. Sometimes when I watch a movie first time, I go about feeling the movie and what it made me feel. So I'm not as quick on the uptake with plot lines and narratives as you are. And a lot of people are. So maybe the second time that I'll see it, I'll see that connection. But that just poses more questions for me. Why was she not like this anti-hero in the beginning? I mean, they kind of started to play on it, but then they didn't really, like, I don't know. There's just all these characters have some form of angst behind them that create these, you rise above your own shortcomings and your father being killed, another reference to Black Panther, and you being lost in time and frozen, Captain America. Gamma rays made you have a big green butt. Like there are things that you work against these whole entire movies. And with Thor, it's outside, it's not inside. He knows he's a god. He has a brother who is the god of mischief. He's a pain in the ass. His father and his relationship is all screwed up. He's lied to him his whole entire existence. He has a sister. Blah, blah, blah. There's intricate things written into these movies that make these characters have depth. And for me, it might be there on a second viewing, but the truth of the matter is, and this is where I don't like making statements that I thought Brie Larson was flat. Let me clarify. It's not that I thought she was flat. I thought she was given stuff that did not help her rise to this angst-ridden hero who's going to rise above all of this stuff. But that said, it might be there on a second viewing. But what I was going to get ready to say is I don't like making drastic statements like Brie Larson was flat because I admire her so much. And the movie was flat. That might be I didn't understand something in the narrative. But the last thing I want to say is the most severe. There's nothing about this film that makes me want to see it again to find out if I'm not following it correctly. Even Ant-Man and Wasp, which I have not seen again since the first time I saw it, I'm still interested in seeing it again. If it shows up on Netflix, I'll watch it again. I can't not watch Black Panther. I cannot not watch Captain America Civil War. As a matter of fact, I have to scroll very quickly past them or I'll stop on them and continue to watch them. Even Iron Man 2 and 3, which I'm not a fan of Iron Man 3 at all. I will watch it again to try to figure out what was it that they thought that made this an interesting movie. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe on the third view and the fourth view. And we've talked about this with certain directors. Sometimes their voices just are not being heard because we're not adjusting our hearing to it. We're not listening to it through their ears. We're listening to it through our expectations. But I have no expectations of Captain Marvel. None. Let me make this point clear also, because you mentioned something. It is completely insignificant to me that she's female. It doesn't even register on my thoughts. It doesn't make a bit of difference. Yes, it's important that it's a female character and it's made $500 million, but that's for our real world social issues and making these films for people, to greenlight other films like the Black Widow film and so forth and so on. But I've grown up in a world of comic books where she's stronger than everybody else. So I know this about Captain Marvel. It's not significant to me that she's female at all, other than the social, I was going to say ramifications, but that sounds like a bad thing. The social enlightenment that something like this brings, and other people will now pen movies with women as leads, regardless of whether or not they're superheroes, because it made $600 million. Other than that, it's no more significant to me that Nick Fury is a man or Hawkeye is a guy. Doesn't matter to me at all. None. As a matter of fact, most of the superheroes are female, end up being smarter. So, it's not significant is my point.
Well, I think that in some ways I could see where they were it's kind of a disservice to, Brie Larson to put her in a position where you have to quickly give her a situation where she doesn't know who she is. And so the whole plot of this movie should be her, I guess it is her finding out who she really is. But we start compounding that with the Skrull Kree back and forth and the switch 'em up of she's Kree, but the Kree are bad. In a like a top-down view, the Kree are doing things to the Skrulls that are bad, and so now she's having to divorce herself from the Kree side. It's a lot. I mean, and I brought it up a little bit earlier. Like, this movie is a lot. This movie is a fish out of water, nostalgia-based 90s throwback, fill in the blank type of a movie. Plus, it's a find your heritage, go back home, figure out who you really are type of a thing too. It's a lot to cram in, and maybe could have been done more gracefully if there were less of those elements in this movie. I think I don't rewatch Marvel movies that much. I watch Guardians of the Galaxy more and Guardians of the Galaxy 2 more, mainly because of Steph, because she loves those movies and they're very easy to watch. And I love those movies too. But for me, I guess there's nothing calling me back to Captain America Civil War specifically. Or, I mean, I have seen Black Panther more than others. And that's because it's a little bit more of a complex movie for me. I do like Iron Man 3 too. I like the concept of Iron Man 3. And I think that, it's, Robert Downey Jr. is the most Robert Downey Jr. in that movie. And I like what he does as an actor. Like, he just plays himself. And we've talked about actors who do that, who just kind of like go on screen and like do them and it works. And he is one of those actors. But so I don't go back to movies. It's been, I mean, I probably haven't seen Captain America First Avenger since it came out. I just haven't gone back to it. And so I don't know. I mean, I look at it more of like I was saying earlier, like it's a full season of television type of a thing. And so I don't know. I'm not trying to qualify each movie in an individual way. I'm kind of looking at how it's all being put together in a global way, and more of a top-down view. So I don't know. I guess I didn't have as many issues with it, but I probably wasn't expecting as much out of it either. Do you think that you were expecting a certain amount out of this movie?
Nothing at all. No, not at all. Not at all. And I'm pretty good at separating myself from the hype, and I'm pretty good at separating myself because I've trained myself. And we've talked about this before. When I was a kid, I was having a hard time when I was a kid to following a story, in moving pictures. So I kind of trained myself to go, okay, that's the boy, that's the girl, they like each other, that's the bad guy, that's the good guy. And I had to train myself to follow a storyline in movies. I don't know why. I would get lost in something like the way Godzilla looked or the way King Kong looked, and the way that they went up the Empire State Building was much more interesting than what they were talking about, what was happening down on the street. So anyway, the point to that is that I have trained myself to not allow my expectations to influence me, because I wait to see these movies. I can't see some of these movies on opening weekend because big crowds kind of ruin things for me. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And this was a very respectful crowd, and there was only about 24 people in the theater. It was a Tuesday afternoon, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Alamo Drafthouse has shown me that there is a paradise outside of my normal movie-going experience where people just talk and influence me. So I don't go when the movie's first open unless we're going to talk about it and we have a limited time and I have no other choice. So it's not about expectations for me. I have no expectations about Captain Marvel. I have no expectations about that character. I have no expectations. Now I know a lot more about her through somebody else who was kind of educating me on, I know this character, sort of, but Captain Marvel was a guy first for me. That's how I was introduced to him, the character. And Captain Marvel to me is Shazam, because that's what they used to call him, and now because of legalities they can't. And he was Captain Marvel, and then he said Shazam, and that's how he becomes Captain Marvel. And now he has to say it like he really means it, and that's how he becomes Shazam. Anyway, the point to that is that I have no expectations of this character. I have no expectations about the MCU. I have no idea that they're going to connect this. Obviously, they do, because, once again, I've mentioned the beeper like 5 times, so obviously that's an important part to me. But I have no expectations other than going and seeing something that's going to tell me something about a character that makes me feel something about them, makes me relate on some kind of level to them. A fish out of water is a storyline that goes back to the Greeks. And we've been using it over and over again. And there's probably like 10 storylines, and we use them over and over again. And we've talked many times on this podcast about boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy finds girl again, fish out of water, whore with a heart of gold. We've talked about all of these storylines. It's how you take that story, that infinitely told story, and make it interesting for this character. And for me, it's lacking something. Now, I want to say this. There are a lot of great things in this film, okay? Her costume is awesome. That green one is cool. The red, gold, and blue one is awesome. The way she looks when she's fighting is incredible. Some of the fight sequences are incredible. Some of the space battles are incredible. There are not enough of them in the beginning of the film. I would have just rather gone bombastic, completely over the top, crazy, nuts with some kind of battle in the beginning of the film that didn't add or subtract from the narrative. It just was there for eye candy, because it's lacking in the beginning.
Kind of
this
like
film.
a pre-credit sequence in a Bond movie.
Yeah, and then have her kind of mess up, and then see Jude Law triggering her button on the back of her neck, something to, I don't know, that thing just bugged me. I mean, we've seen it so many times before. We have. It couldn't have been some kind of like liquid fusion like the computer thing was. It just was not original. Anyway, the point, I was trying to be positive about this film, and then all of a sudden I got dragged back down to the lacklusterness of it for me. You know, the sequence at the end when she's fighting, flying around, fighting, that whole helmet with her whole mohawk that lights up is very cool. And she handles it. And when she puts the flight jacket on at the end, that is super cool, because that's just Captain Marvel. Her relationship with the little girl was way more interesting to me than anything else in the film.
And that's Monica Rambeau, who's gonna be, I could see that character being in Endgame somehow, or especially in future MCU films, because she's supposed to be Photon. That's a tease to, because if you can imagine a whatever 12-year-old girl or 13, I don't know how old she is, 11-year-old girl, something like that in 1995. Now it's 2019 or 2020, you're talking 25 years. What is that? 15 years? No. Yeah, 25 years of, and so she's going to be 30 something years old. So she's going to be like prime, superhero age. I don't know. She's going to be a superhero somehow in the future. So I think that's something that's definitely been teased by this movie.
But that's my point. I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And about her meeting back up with her, because their relationship was very interesting. And the best friend, the co-pilot, or the other pilot,
Maria.
Yeah. Lashana Lynch. She was great. I like the idea that they put their statements in there, because it wasn't like 3 or 4 years after, it wasn't until like 1993 or 94 that women could actually captain fighter pilots in our society. So that's there. It's not important to the movie. It's not important to the narrative, but there's a strength between those characters that you understand that they've had a struggle. And when you see Monica, see her for the first time, there's a rich, textured relationship, because they've had to go through all of this stuff. And it's heartbreaking when she realizes that she doesn't remember her and all that other stuff. All of that stuff was infinitely more interesting than anything else going on in the film for me. And maybe that's because I believe things should be character driven, and mostly it is. And then when you find out Ben Mendelsohn is not who he is, and that touching scene with his...
So you were okay with that?
Loved it.
Okay.
I didn't have a problem with that, because I was like, aha, Ben Mendelsohn isn't the bad guy. Take that, everybody who keeps saying he's the bad guy.
We just said that like last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it was touching. It's always touching to see somebody who's misunderstood. Now, there's a war going on. So this is way more than just misunderstanding somebody. There are people who are actually hurting each other based on a hatred towards these two societies, the Kree and the Skrull. So when you see him with his daughter and his wife, that's a beautiful scene. And when you realize that he's manipulated the situation to get something, even though it kind of benefited the main character at the same time, all interesting. All storylines we've seen before. We have seen these twists and turns and takes, and bad guy, good guy, Robin Hood, steal from the rich to give to the poor. We've seen all these characters before. And but there's a richness behind understanding where Ben Mendelsohn is coming from as his character that the rest of the film could have benefited from. And I don't know if they could have done that. It comes down to those kind of stakes didn't seem that high for Captain Marvel. She didn't know who she was. Okay. She can still kick butt and, shoot beams out of her hands. She's double-crossed. Okay. It's happened a million times before. If she had accidentally killed maybe the Skrull daughter and then found out that they weren't the bad guys, that could have textured her character even more. There's just, it would have been devastating, but it would have given them something to cling on to, because when she's having that moment at the end, that moment is about her and a best friend that she's not had contact with in 6 years. And one knows who she is and one doesn't really remember it. And she's starting to remember it. And that scene is very touching, but it's still just a small little human subplot that doesn't really do anything for the narrative. But if she made mistakes as a Kree policeman, whatever they're called, soldiers.
Yeah, they're part of the Star Force.
Star Force, right, which we've heard about before. Mm-hmm. And so if she had done something like that, or if she had, I don't know, if she had made a mistake as a Kree Star Force person, then she would have had to examine not only the truth of who she was, but the truth of the decisions based on what people have said is right and wrong. And then her struggling with believing that, and then still struggling with it, not trusting Ben Mendelsohn's character, because they become friends very quickly.
Yeah, real quickly.
And he kind of double crosses her when they get into that spaceship that's in stealth mode, and they're trying to get that thing that's going to complete whatever.
The Tesseract.
And then you realize that thank you. That thing.
That big, huge thing that's one of the Infinity Stones. Sure, that thing.
Well, it's got to be one of the most important ones, because it's shown up in a lot of different movies. I mean, it really, really has. And so then you find out that, Ben Mendelsohn's character's kind of double-crossed her, but not really, because she gets what she wants and he gets his family back because they're enslaved. That's touching. But really, all of that has nothing to do with the main character. Nothing. That substance, that grit, that nasty side of the human experience, meaning how we feel as humans watching a movie. It doesn't matter that they're Kree or from another planet. We still have empathy towards other people. All of that stuff, it matters not to Captain Marvel's existence, and she can't do anything about that until she finally figures it out, and then they kind of, I don't know.
He's giving up, folks.
I wanted to do positive things. Well, I wanted to say positive things because some of the fights sequences at the end are really interesting looking, but are they that interesting looking, or are we just lacking so much up to that point that anything, when she starts to become, here you go. You want to hear the silliest thing I disliked about this movie? And I said it about Iron Man 3, and I'll say it about this one too. I cannot stand it when you have a character who has a costume, who is a superhero, and you spend 45 minutes not being that superhero. She's not in that costume for like the middle part of that movie, just like he's not in that costume for the middle part of Iron Man 3. And it's like, we want to see Captain Marvel fly around in her really cool uniform. Give it to us. Why is she not? I mean, and she puts on the Nine Inch Nails shirt and the hat. And
So did you feel like the nostalgia was like overwrought? Did you feel like because I was trying to like square the music choices, the I'm Just a Girl, the No Doubt, and all the one that really got me was like when the security guard rolls down the window at the beginning of the movie. She comes out of the Blockbuster and he's listening to What a Man, and it's like, okay, fine, but like, do we have to shove each little like segment of this movie with, like, it's 1995. We need to make sure everybody knows that it's 1995. Like, I don't know. And then the I'm Just a Girl. It's one of those like, yes, that is so on the nose that maybe it works, and I didn't feel like I wasn't like, wow, that's just too on the nose. I didn't feel that way, but I know people have criticized that. So,
Well, I loved all the music because I love the 90s, and it's kind of hard for me to look back and say that was the 90s and it's all about nostalgia and all that other stuff. It's not, because I lived through it, so it's just part of my past. It doesn't seem like remember when, although the 70s seem like that, even though I was born and raised in the 70s. So I guess it's the music choices. They just made
yeah.
obvious choices. There's so much other better songs. If he had rolled down the window and U2's Mysterious Ways was playing,
Okay.
she
Yeah.
moves in mysterious ways, it would have given you what you want. It would have been on the nose. It would have reminded you that that was a huge hit in the early 90s. It would have been appropriate for that man to be listening to that album. And it would have just been like, because she's moving in mysterious ways, people, duh. She just fell through a blockbuster and she just burst her way through. I mean, it's just, there's so many. And that song choice might have been just too obvious too. The song choices were just so, it's just like they're great songs. I love that No Doubt album
me too.
that song
Yeah.
comes from. But there's a lot of garbage songs out there that were in the early 90s that were great, that would have been great. Now, as a matter of fact, the whole song,
Yes. Celebrity Skin. Yeah.
yeah, that would have been I love that song too. I love that album. That would have been a much better choice at somewhere in the movie to have you remember it at the end of the
Even that
movie.
one in the No Doubt position would have been good, I think. I mean, because it's rocking, it's
Absolutely,
driving.
no doubt. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, it would have been,
Yeah.
No doubt. Yes, it would have been great.
Yeah. And it's character driven though. So the songs that we just used as an example are character driven. The other ones just kind of like are touchstones of the time. Yes, they're appropriate for I'm Just a Girl. I get why they're saying that. I get why they thought that was appropriate, but it's not as interesting as some of the other stuff. Why isn't there a Nine Inch Nails song in the movie? Because Trent Reznor, it's a male lead of a band. Why? She's
Yeah.
wearing a Nine Inch Nails shirt. Pretty Hate Machine is a pretty important album for that time. Maybe a little too dark, but that would have given it some kind of like. I mean, there's a couple songs on the album you certainly can't play in a
that's
comic
true.
book.
I never had that one. I had Downward Spiral. That was like the one that I had.
Oh, I love that
But
album.
I mean,
too.
that's the
I love that
cliche
album
one, I
too,
guess.
yeah.
But still, okay. Do you feel like, well, okay, have we had a '90s nostalgia movie yet? I was talking to Justin, who we've had on the podcast before. I was talking to him about this, and he couldn't think of one, and I couldn't think of one. Have we had a '90s nostalgia movie? I mean, there are movies from the '90s that were like singles and things like that that were of the time, but have we had a '90s nostalgia movie?
Kind of like that Emma Stone movie Easy A is kind of an 80s John Hughes homage.
I'm
Is that
more
what you're talking
specifically
about?
saying like 1993, Dazed and Confused came out. That was a 70s nostalgia movie. That was a movie that came out that was
Right.
like all about 1976. Like that. It was a 20-year, like, we're going to look back 20 years. And the filmmaker, Richard Linklater, was like, this is what happened when I was a kid and when I was going to high school. I want to share it with everybody and share all of these crazy things that happened when I was a kid. And this is like a snapshot of that time. So now people are 20 years ahead, 20, whatever, 4 years ahead of 1995. Has there been a 1995 movie or a 1990s nostalgia movie? There's definitely been 1980s nostalgia movies, but has there been a 1990s nostalgia movie? I could not come up with one off the top of my head, and neither could Justin, and you are racking your brain.
All I'm trapped in is thinking how great Dazed and Confused is, because
It's really
it is
great.
that without being that. You know what I mean? It's that without being. It's not.
Well, it's a
not an
Universal
ode to the
movie set
70s.
in 1976.
Yeah, where he gets to tap into those touchstones of the 70s, you know?
Yeah.
When they show up with the Kiss figures at the in the woods, I'm
The
like,
Moon
there
Tower?
it is. Oh my God, I love that. No, I don't think there has been, but I mean, well, we had the mid 90s, the skateboard movie but that's
Yes.
not really is that really? I mean, I
It
guess
is-
it's, yeah, I guess,
It is a nostalgia movie. There have been Lady Bird was another one. So you
Yeah.
can kind of come up with a couple of those, but they didn't like lean hard into like mid 90s didn't lean. I mean, I guess maybe music wise it did lean hard, But
yeah, it did.
it was a subset.
In the
it
best
was not
way,
a,
though.
like, yeah, it was a subset. It was like,
Yeah.
if you were a skater in 1995, sure, yeah, that's what your life was like. But I wasn't
Sure.
a skater, so for me, it didn't. I don't know. It didn't feel like it was a all-encompassing. Yeah. But you're right. Mid-90s, Lady Bird. Those are the two that I can think of that were like, ish. But Lady Bird was even like, I don't know, early 2000s or something like that. But I don't know. I just don't know if we just don't even have a yardstick to measure it by. Once again, they're doing a lot of stuff. They're doing this nostalgia movie and this fish out of water movie and this, superhero movie and all of these things. And they're cramming them all into whatever, an hour and 45 minutes. It's like, that's 2 hours, I guess. So that's difficult. I don't know. It's difficult.
It's difficult, but I guess for me, and we started this with, I don't make movies, you don't make movies. We just go and see movies, and they either answer questions that we didn't even know we had or answer questions that we did have, and they do it in a significant way that helps us like a movie or not like a movie. So my question is, then if it is all of those things, those separate entities that you just spoke about, it being a 90s flashback thing or nostalgia, and it being a origin film, all should answer one question. How does it serve the narrative of this story? So if it's just to remind people that people wore Nine Inch Nails t-shirts back in the 90s, then that's just, it's sort of, it's not a cheap shot, but it's an easy shot. I mean,
low-hanging fruit.
The grunge look. Yeah, thank you. The grunge look, lose the flannel. I mean, it's.
Yeah. Okay. Here's what we should do. We should, obviously, in like a month, less than a month, Endgame's coming out. So what we should do is we should revisit both this and Endgame after they've both come out. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about Endgame, but we should revisit both of those movies when they come out on rental, something, a few months removed from them being out in the public consciousness, I think, and then determine whether Captain Marvel was an efficient enough movie in setting up her character for Endgame. I think that might be a nice conversation to determine whether Captain Marvel did what it was supposed to do and was a successful movie in setting up this character for the future or not. Because I don't think right now we may not have a good way of. You're like saying, nope, it's a bad movie. Because, it's done. We're done.
No, I'm not saying that. No. Nope. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is one has nothing to do with the other for me. It doesn't matter to me whether or not they set it up right for Endgame or not. First of all, we were introduced to her for Endgame. We know she's going to show up where she showed up. She showed up. It's going to have no bearing on this film whatsoever. This film is going to have no bearing on Endgame whatsoever. Okay. Is it? I like your idea about revisiting it again. And I'm always about that because that gives me a second opinion or a second viewing. And it's, I was grappling with Rami Malek winning the Oscar and wondering what everybody else was seeing that I might have missed. So I watched Bohemian Rhapsody a second time. Now, not my pick, and which doesn't really matter, but I did see some things in that film a second time, his nuances when he was writing songs and how he really got into it to the point where he was like shocked by himself when he's at the piano, mama, and he kind of like, he loses his breath because he can't believe he just like wrote that epic thing that he knows at that moment in the film is going to be still sung by people like me who still can't sing anyway. And it's a great little nuanced moment. So I do learn things on a second and third and fourth visit to something. The bottom line comes to, is it going to still be a movie where the narrative is flat and shows us nothing interesting or nothing more than a certain amount of interesting things a second time? It's not significant to me that it connects a character to a bigger universe. I need to know what that character means in this movie, this universe, not how it connects to the rest of it. Because there are people, it's like the ultimate question about the Lord of the Rings. Can you see Two Towers without seeing Fellowship? Can you see Return of the King without seeing Two Towers? I'm not sure. I usually weigh on the side of maybe you would be able to see Return of the King without seeing the other two. But I'm not sure you can take the second movie out and watch it separately without knowing anything about the first and second. So it's significant to that trilogy to know what happened in the first and last film. And if those two films aren't as great as the second film, then it's not going to add up. So that's significant. This right here is a standalone movie that connects to a bigger universe. And I actually think, with all due respect, it weighs more into your understanding of this film than it does me and a lot of other people that I'm reading stuff about, because and you are giving it a long rope based on that fact. And I understand that. But for me, as a standalone film, and I hate to compare it to anything, but if you're talking about connecting it to the universe, you can see Ragnarok and never see another Thor movie or another MCU movie ever again. And you would be satisfied with just that film. Okay, and it connects to the other things.
Sure.
You can see, I hate to say it again, Black Panther. Now, it was just nominated for the Oscars, and won 3 Oscars, so we should celebrate that as much as we possibly can. You can watch that film and never see another superhero movie, and it's all-encompassing right then and there. So what they did in those films, for me, they left a lot of things unanswered in this film that could have made it a whole, complete movie, regardless of it connecting. I do like the idea of revisiting it again. Yeah. And I have the right to take it all back.
So we haven't talked at all about the de-aging of Clark Gregg and Samuel L. Jackson. So to me, that means that it didn't register to you as inauthentic or badly done. So I think that's a good thing that we didn't discuss it, because we're to the point now where it's just part of the capabilities, part of the tool bag of filmmakers. I know there's some ethical questions that may come up in the future, but right now those questions aren't being asked or answered really, because we have so much footage of Samuel L. Jackson specifically from the mid-90s that there were, and I've read a few articles and looked at Lola, the visual effects company that was responsible for doing that, and there's so much footage from that time, and the footage that they got is such high resolution now, and the tracking is so good now that it's really kind of like a non-issue. And there is a second performance that's happened, that second performance that is happening in the visual effects, because they have complete control over what Samuel L. Jackson's face does in this movie throughout the whole movie. And they are honoring his performance, but they don't have to. So that opens up a whole can of worms that you could talk about. That can mean a lot to, a lot of different things. But I think that in this movie it works well. But they've gotten to this point where they can do a feature-length film with face replacement, essentially, whereas in the past, they kind of like dipped their toe into it, even within the MCU with, Iron Man, I guess with Tony Stark, then with Ant-Man, and they kind of have ramped up throughout time. But these same guys, Lola, they did Social Network, so they did the face replacement on Armie Hammer's double, Josh Peck. They did that face replacement, all those things. So they're well versed. They've done it for a decade. So they've got it down. I think they think it looks really good. I don't have anything bad to say about it, but it does make it interesting to see, like, we'll see it this year, I guess, with The Irishman. They're doing that with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. They are de-aging them for half of the film. They will be in half of the film as younger versions of themselves. So we'll get to see if that works.
I have no problem with any of it. It's another trick in a bag of light being reflected on a screen. I mean,
but what happens when Al Pacino stars in a movie 50 years from now and he's dead?
Oh well, it's a movie.
Yeah,
it's not like they took like an actor and they project his face on stage, and now this poor actor is having to act like Al Pacino with his face being projected stuff or prosthetics and all this other stuff. It's not the same medium. It's not the same thing. They've been manipulating things in movies since the idea of movies. The whole idea of, the crash on the moon in that famous black and white film that we see. Yes, thank you. I mean, we've been seeing it our whole entire lives. So is that the ethical question that you're talking about? Is it unethical to, well, they've already made a movie about that, first of all.
Simone? Is that what it is?
Where that, yeah, isn't that Al Pacino too?
Mm-hmm, it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, here's the thing. If it was this like honest reflection of the human existence from the beginning, where it was just, a black stage and somebody filming it and candlelight, and that's what they stayed with, and then they started to do things like this, then maybe there's an ethical question. But they have been manipulating what we have been seeing for decades, and that's movie magic. I mean, now here's the thing. I guess the ethical question comes with, like, if an actor is like, dies in a horrific car accident or gets murdered or something like that, and then you bring him back or her back, then that starts to get twisted. But at the same time, it's like, I'm sure there are things in contracts now that says we get to do this face manipulation thing that we're going to do. And if we need to use you in the future for other things, regardless of whether or not, here's how much you're going to get paid. Here's what you're going to get paid to do this. Here's what you're going to get paid to do voiceovers. And here's what you're going to get paid when you're 90 and can't do this anymore. So it's all going to be contractually figured out like everything else is. And the thing is that the only ethical question is this. The ethical question comes from when people, producers, directors, actors start to talk about how that person's performance wasn't warranted of this accolade because I shot them up close and they really can't act, and I've been using close up on them. So that's why Cher won the Cannes Film Festival Award. Now that's something Peter Bogdanovich just came out and said, that she can't act, and that the reason why she's so good in Mask and the reason why she won the Cannes Film Festival Award was because I shot her in up close footage for the whole entire film, because she's good. You can see into her eyes, and she's got this like feel sorry for me look, and that works for the character and all this other stuff. So it's me who did this that had her win this award. Now that starts to get unethical in my opinion. First of all, be respectful. Okay. You worked with her, find a way. Somebody asked him recently in an interview, who's the worst person that you've ever had to work for? I mean, there's a professional way to answer that. And I guess because he is who he is, and because he's at a point in his life where he feels like he can just be truthful, he answered that. He said, Cher, she can't act. And the reason why she has this award was because I shot her in close-ups. I think that's the only ethical question that we have, that then you start to say, I own that performance because that person really can't act, but in the editing room, I made her look like she can act. Well, how many times has that been true? Probably millions, gazillions of times that people have been manipulated. Film editors and directors have manipulated somebody's performance. And we go back to that discussion with David Fincher, where he has taken one the and one no and
or
one
syllables.
All right, or syllables. That to me is way more interesting of a discussion of ethics than face recreation, whatever they call it. It's still that actor. It's still that actor's face. So is it unethical to make a cartoon character look a certain way, regardless if the closed caption thing, or what do they call it?
Oh, like motion capture?
Yeah, motion capture. That's what I meant to say. And then they will actually manipulate the character, the animated character, to actually do Jeremy Irons' face in The Lion King. And then they base that animation on the actual person's face. So it's without the actor, that couldn't have happened. And so does that mean that they can make him smile broader, or they can make the Grinch have a bigger smile, which is what Ron Howard did in the Jim Carrey Grinch film? Does it make it less of what the actor did? No. So I don't think right now there's an ethical question. I kind of think it's brilliant. And I kind of think it's great that you really don't have to really worry about HD and all of these things anymore, because now they can make you look and it's believable.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have flashback sequence, instead of having an actress or an actor where they had to put Vaseline over top of the camera to make them look young again, they can actually make them, because they've done that with Jessica Lange in American Horror Story on TV. And it's unnerving because you believe that's her 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it creates this substance to the performance that wasn't there before. So I have no problem with it.
Interesting.
None at all. Make me look the best you can make me look, or make me look the ugliest. I don't
See,
care.
that's interesting, because I thought you would have been like, we're taking actors out of business by having this digital cache of performances that programmers can go back to and create whatever performance they want. So I don't know, that seems interesting.
Well, but that had to come from somewhere.
Sure.
That had to come from somewhere.
But you don't have to pay those performers after the time that you got the performances from them. It's like that, you're done.
That's where it starts to become a question.
Exactly. That's where
and I'm sure there are Samuel Jackson stipulations in this contract. You use my eyebrow from 1989 or my lip from 1992, I get paid. And then you should get paid. But it comes down to always relating everything to coming from a theater background. That's like saying to me, the character is a middle-aged guy who wears a beard and glasses, and you have to gray your beard and you have to put glasses on, but you can't do that because that's really faking it, and that's not really who that person looks like, so you really can't do that. Well, that's character building. That's, you put them in tight pants if that's what they're supposed to be in. You put them in leather boots if that's what they're supposed to be in. I have no idea why all those choices and what that says about me as a person, that those are the things that come to mind. But if you cast a blonde who has to be redhead, you put a wig on her or you dye her hair. It's no more manipulative to me to do that than it is to take somebody's eyeball. I will say this, that David Fincher idea or technique does start to skirt a line that, and that's a really far down the road line for me, meaning it's really stretching that line, because some people would stop at a certain point where you go, yeah, no, you can't change that sentence with one word. But if he's doing just syllables, it starts to become more of a manipulation. But that said, speaking of Peter Bogdanovich again, he says in that interview, there are certain actors and actresses that when I gave them line readings, they just did it. Mm-hmm. And then other actors that I never had to do that to because they just got it. And then other actors who fought me on, I need to find the character. I need to find the motivation. He said, no, say it like this.
Yeah.
What's the difference? It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I kind of like that, because if I can't grasp it and I can't figure it out on my own and you tell me what it's supposed to sound like, I'm okay with that, because it's still coming from me. It's still me who has to say it every night, or still me who has to make that emotion true. So I have, there's a thing in the theater where you don't give anybody a line reading. And if you do as a director, that means you haven't done your job as a director. I don't know. Putting on a tweed jacket versus a corduroy jacket, and you still make that choice. The character needs to wear the tweed instead of the corduroy. It's still the same choice. If you're going, no, don't go in there, and the director's like, no, you're not. You need to figure out this is a defensive move, so you need to say that in a defense or blame them or whatever the verb you're going to use. And you can't get it. What's the difference? You gave him a tweed jacket because the corduroy didn't work for the character, so why not give him the line? I know a lot of people who would be blown away that I just said that, but I figure it like this. Whatever it takes to get you to tell the story, how you hear it as a director, I'm kind of okay with. I'm okay with it. That's going to get me in a lot of trouble.
That's what that is interesting, because I know that there is kind of some sort of like an unspoken rule in some circles where it's like you don't cross the streams type of a thing. You're a director, you need to, but your point of like picking the type of jacket that an actor wears as a director versus picking how an actor says a line, you could very easily say that those are the same choices. Whether there's, this type of flower in the vase or that type of flower in the vase, it could be just as important of a choice as how someone says the line. Now, some directors may get to that in a different way. We've talked in the past about Kubrick and Fincher, both taking actors to the extent of their sanity, by doing multiple takes to the point where where the actors aren't even realizing what they're doing or what they're saying. And they're like disembodied essentially, to where they're just thinking about leaving the set and not being there. And in that way, those directors may get the performance that they're looking for. That seems like a sort of a sadistic way of getting what you want as a director, when you might just be able to say like, hey, say it like this. And if the actor acquiesces, then you get it and everybody goes home without having to do 99 takes. So I don't know. It's good. I think it's good. I'm sure a director would think that it's good that you would be willing to take a line reading and just spit it back out at them and be like, you like it? Okay, great. Let's move on.
Okay, let me clarify a couple of things. First of all, I think what Kubrick is doing and Fincher is doing when it comes to 99 takes is completely different than giving somebody a line reading. I think they're trying to break the actors down in a good, healthy way. I don't know if it's a good, healthy way, but for me, I'm okay with it. Until they get to the point where they're no longer saying the lines because they're lines, or they're no longer thinking about them acting. They're just getting it done, and maybe the scene calls for that. Here's the thing. A line reading to me, and I've never been given a line reading, so I don't know how I would react to it. But to me, it's an indication of how the director wants the character to go. So if I'm not hitting something that's significant and they say, hey, if the character said it like this, if it opened me up to every other thing that would make that character gel in the director's eyes, then I'm all about that. But that works for me on a whole bunch of different levels. An intention, we've talked about this a million times. And I want. A verb works for me as long as I know what the verb is. So here's the thing. And to explain it really quick, there's an A character, B character. They have a conflict. They want something from each other. Okay. What you want from that person and how you go about getting it is the resolution to the scene. Okay. So I want to manipulate you in order for you to give me your money so I can get out of this scene. You want to seduce her so you can get the information based on what your intelligence just talked to you about. You need to get that information from this woman. The only way you can do it is seduce her or the guy, whatever. So those are verbs. You can play those verbs. So my question becomes, if a director gives me a line reading, what's the difference between that and him telling me or her telling me, you need to blame, not manipulate. You need to seduce, not manipulate. You need to comfort, not blame. You're still giving a verb that the actor is not grabbing onto. Now, for me, once I know that's the intention of the scene, because there's an overall intention that you're playing the whole entire time, and then there's the in-between scenes where each beat you might have a different intention. Usually those intentions inside a scene go back to your main intention, okay? Does all that make sense so far? So if I'm not on the right intention and the director knows it and the director says, seduce, not manipulate, the whole world opens up to me in a different way. And so you think to yourself, for me, how it works is I will say a line in my head and think I need to seduce that person into getting what I want from them. And for whatever reason, that verb in my head colors everything I'm saying in a different way. So if I have the wrong intention and the director tells me what the right intention should be, sort of the same thing. It still puts the onus on the actor to figure out the rest of it. But for me, if it's like one line that's important and I'm not getting it, and he goes or she goes, you need to manipulate, and I'm still not getting it, hey, how about trying it like this? Usually directors give you examples. They'll say, well, when you were a kid and you wanted ice cream and you had just eaten, an ice cream bar, but you wanted another one, what would you do to get your mother to give you another ice cream bar? And then you think about that and you're like, hey, Mom, I love you. You look pretty today. And you just go into it because now you have an intention. If you still can't get it, and then the director goes, oh, it really should be more like this. I kind of is on the same wavelength for me. I think that we use certain terms in our language that have gotten demonized, line readings. That doesn't necessarily mean you go, okay, In the third scene, the second line you say like this. In the fourth scene, the fifth line you say like this. That to me starts to be like what David Fincher is doing. And if that's how David Fincher feels he needs to get the performance out of you, then that's what David Fincher, the Academy Award nominated director making millions of dollars, has decided to do. I'm fine with that. But most directors will find a way of tricking you into figuring it out on your own. But if I don't figure it out on my own and they want to hand it to me,
you'll take it.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Now, a lot of actors can't do that. A lot of actors are not capable of taking a line reading and doing it like the director wants. So it's a technique that can backfire. So I don't know how we got off on that, but it's an interesting
the crazy
discussion.
part is that the second half of this podcast is, to me, infinitely more interesting than talking about Captain Marvel. So that being said,
I wasn't going to say it.
I think that at some point maybe we'll revisit this movie, maybe after Endgame. But it's a successful movie. I'm sure it will get a sequel. I'm excited to see what Brie Larson does with the character, but maybe it'll be something that she can dig into more now that her character has been established in this universe. So you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. We'll see you next week.